Imagine a military aircraft so fundamentally unstable that the hardest part of its mission isn't surviving enemy fire, it's surviving its own aerodynamics. The V-22 Osprey was pitched as the ultimate aviation miracle, a revolutionary machine designed to take off vertically like a helicopter, rotate its engines in mid-air, and fly at the high speeds of a turboprop airplane. But engineering this miracle took 2005 grueling years, burned through a staggering $30 billion in research and development, and has claimed the lives of dozens of American servicemen in catastrophic, non-combat crashes. Yet, despite a horrific track record of fleet-wide groundings, mysterious mechanical failures, and fatal plunges, the United States Marine Corps completely refuses to retire it. To understand why America is locked into flying a machine that constantly battles the urge to fall out of the sky, you have to look past the sensational news headlines. The real story isn't about bad pilots, it is a brutal clash between extreme mechanical engineering, the unforgiving laws of physics, and a military bureaucracy trapped in a multi-billion-dollar sunk cost fallacy. The origin of this $30 billion nightmare started with a very real tactical problem. Following the disastrous 1980 hostage rescue attempt in Iran, known as Operation Eagle Claw, the U.S. military realized a fatal flaw in its logistics. Conventional helicopters were highly maneuverable, but they were painstakingly slow and lacked the fuel range for deep-strike global operations. Fixed-wing transport planes like the C-130 Hercules were fast and had massive range, but they were completely useless without miles of paved runways, a luxury you don't have in hostile jungles or remote mountains. The Pentagon demanded an impossible hybrid. They wanted an aircraft that could lift 24 heavily armed Marines vertically from the cramped deck of an amphibious assault ship, then transition mid-flight to tear across the sky at nearly 300 miles per hour. On paper, the tiltrotor concept was an absolute game-changer. But the aerospace engineers tasked with bringing this sci-fi concept to life were about to run headfirst into an aerodynamic brick wall. To make the V-22 Osprey work, engineers were forced to design proprotors that were an extreme mechanical compromise. The physics are strict. A traditional helicopter features long, thin blades designed specifically to hover efficiently by pushing massive amounts of air downward slowly. Conversely, a fixed-wing airplane utilizes short, wide propellers designed to pull the aircraft forward efficiently. The Osprey's massive 38-foot blades had to somehow do both. The result was a blade design that was fundamentally terrible at doing either job perfectly. Because the blades are unusually short and thick for a hovering aircraft, the Osprey's engines have to force them to spin at incredibly high RPMs just to generate the brute force lift required to rip a 60,000-pound loaded fuselage off the ground. This brute force approach creates an extraordinarily violent and unstable column of downward air, known as rotor downwash. This downwash isn't just a physical nuisance that kicks up debris on the landing zone. It is a deadly aerodynamic trap that birthed the Osprey's most notorious and fatal vulnerability. When a hovering aircraft descends too rapidly into its own turbulent, downward-flowing air, it falls into a terrifying aerodynamic trap called the Vortex Ring State. The rotors begin sucking in the same turbulent air they just pushed down, creating a recirculating donut-shaped vacuum of dead air. The aircraft instantly loses its lift and begins dropping like a stone. In a standard single-rotor helicopter, a skilled pilot can push the nose forward, sliding out of the dirty air column to regain lift and recover. But the Osprey is entirely different. Its rotors are mounted side by side at the extreme ends of a massive 45-foot wing. If a sudden gust of wind or a slight pilot miscalculation causes one rotor to enter the Vortex Ring State just a fraction of a second before the other, the results are catastrophic. This creates extreme asymmetric thrust. One side of the wing loses all lift entirely, while the other side continues pulling violently upward. In the blink of an eye, the Osprey snaps into an uncontrollable roll, flipping completely upside down. Because this aerodynamic failure almost exclusively happens at low altitudes during landing approaches, recovery is physically impossible. The $80 million aircraft slams into the ground before the pilots can even register the warning alarms. But aerodynamics is only half the nightmare. Beneath its composite skin, the Osprey is a mechanical labyrinth. To achieve its mid-air transformation, the V-22 relies on an incredibly complex network of drive shafts and gearboxes hidden inside its wings. If one engine fails in mid-air, a central drive shaft instantly transfers power from the working engine to the opposite rotor, theoretically keeping the aircraft balanced and airborne. However, this intricate system birthed a terrifying, unpredictable glitch known as hard clutch engagement. For reasons engineers struggled for years to permanently isolate, the clutch connecting the engine to the rotor gearbox would suddenly slip, then violently re-engage milliseconds later. This sudden, violent mechanical jolt sends a massive shockwave through the entire drive system, physically shredding the gears and forcing an immediate, desperate emergency landing. It became a mechanical time bomb that led to sweeping fleet-wide groundings, leaving military commanders completely paralyzed. So, with deadly aerodynamics and self-destructing gearboxes, why hasn't the Pentagon hauled the V-22 fleet to the scrapyard? The answer is a textbook example of the sunk cost fallacy, blended with undeniable strategic necessity. The United States Marine Corps didn't just buy the Osprey, they completely redesigned their entire global warfare doctrine around it. In a potential modern conflict in the Indo-Pacific, US Navy carrier groups simply cannot sail close to enemy shores without entering the lethal, highly contested range of Chinese anti-ship ballistic missiles. They are forced to launch operations from hundreds of miles out at sea. A conventional Black Hawk or Chinook helicopter simply does not have the speed or the fuel capacity to bridge that massive oceanic gap. The Osprey is the only operational platform on Earth that can launch off a ship sitting far beyond the enemy's radar horizon and deliver heavily armed combat troops deep into hostile territory at airplane speeds. The Marines are locked in. They have no backup aircraft, and they are out of time and budget to build one from scratch. The true testament to the Osprey's flawed design came not from its enemies, but from a sister branch, the US Army. When the Army recently looked to replace its aging fleet of Black Hawk helicopters, they explicitly analyzed the V-22's brutal track record and flatly refused to buy it. Instead, they awarded a massive contract for a next-generation tiltrotor, the Bell V-280 Valor. While it looks similar to the Osprey, the Army demanded a critical engineering pivot. On the new Valor, the heavy engines do not rotate at all, they remain completely fixed horizontally to the wing. Only the front rotor shafts tilt up and down. This single, brilliant design change eliminates the insanely complex, heavy and fragile rotating gearboxes that plague the Osprey, drastically reducing the chances of mechanical failure and asymmetric thrust. The Army learned directly from the Marine Corps' $30 billion sacrifice. Ultimately, the V-22 Osprey is a tragic paradox. It is undeniably a marvel of human engineering, a machine that violently forces the laws of physics to bend to its will to perform impossible missions. But it is also a fragile, over-engineered compromise that demands absolute perfection from its pilots and mechanics in combat environments where perfection is simply impossible. America spent 3 decades and billions of dollars to build an aviation miracle, only to realize that sometimes fighting gravity with brute mechanical force is a battle you cannot permanently win. The Osprey will keep flying, not because it is a flawless machine, but because the US military has burned the bridge behind it. If you found this breakdown of military engineering and geopolitical strategy eye-opening, make sure to subscribe this channel. Hit the notification bell. Drop your thoughts on the V-22 in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.